Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So on the agenda tonight we have Stevie Ray Vaughan and his brother Jimmy, and they're both going to be playing the same guitar in this performance, and it's titled as Pipeline, but they don't get to their version of Pipeline until the end of this little jam and performance. So we'll get them up on screen and see how they get on. I'm just going to jump in here when they swap positions because I want to point out something that starts right at the beginning of the video. Obviously, Stevie's playing the way that he's just messing around but throwing together such great playing, great blues lines. As soon as he starts playing the rhythm at the beginning of the track, the thing to look out for is how free Stevie is with his rhythm hand, striking all of the strings, but because he's so good at muting all those other strings, all you're getting is that run, the blues run, up and down single notes, and then throwing in occasionally those chords as well, so blending the sound of the chords with the lead work. And there's a lot of technique to that, but of course Stevie makes it look really easy, so it'll fly under the radar. But what we've got is Stevie playing the notes of this run, but then also while he's playing these notes, he's striking all the other strings, but all of those other strings are muted, so it gives it a percussive quality to the run because you get the combination of striking those muted strings at the same time as playing these single notes in this particular blues run. So then when Jimmy joins in on this scaled down version of the guitar, if you have played a half-size guitar or a three-quarter size guitar, you'll know that obviously you can get a better stretch in because now the frets are smaller and it's easier to access scales you might not otherwise be able to get on a full-size guitar. But the trade-off is the size of the frets. As we can see in this still that we've got here, it's going to be so much smaller. You have to be so much more accurate with your finger placements in order to get a really nice clean sound when you're playing on such a smaller guitar neck. And as you'll know, on these shorter scale guitars, if you have played one, the intonation can be a bit of a nightmare sometimes, which we'll probably see later in this video when they travel up the guitar neck. And if you don't know what intonation is, it's basically the accuracy of a note. So it means that if you play an open E string on the guitar, and then you play on fret 12, which is where you see the two dots on the guitar neck here, you should get another E note, but it should be an exact octave above the E that you started with. Whereas when the intonation is out, you do not get a perfect E. It can be flat, and sometimes it can be quite a lot flat. It can be sharp as well. It's just not a perfect replication of the octave below, and that's something that happens on guitars all the time. So when you get your guitar set up, the intonation is sorted out so that when you do hit that 12th fret, you then get an exact replication of the same note that the string would be if it was down to an open string. But let's get back into the video, and now Stevie's on lead and Jimmy's on rhythm. I'm just going to jump in here because we had a little hint there of pipeline that's going to be coming in. This is a great shot just to show the amount that Jimmie's got to stretch in order to get down to play that rhythm guitar, and just holding your body in this position for any length of time must be so uncomfortable. But Jimmie's just gritting and bearing it and not letting it affect his rhythm playing, which is absolutely spot on, which is really impressive considering the angle and the stretch that he's got to do just to get his fingers onto the fretboard. And in terms of Stevie's playing on this scaled down neck, it's so impressive that he gets such a clean sound with all of his lead work, considering the fact that his hands are so big and also that he's just got such wide hands. In terms of just the strength that he had, if you look at some of the pictures of Stevie, you'll see that his hands just look freakishly strong, and that's just even more emphasized by the fact that he used 13 gauge strings. And I know a lot of people will say that Stevie tended to tune down to E flat when he was playing, so using 13 gauge strings tuned down will decrease the tension, which means that it'll be slightly easier to bend. And that is true, but only up to a point, because using 13 gauge strings, even tuning down, they are still going to be mightily heavy to bend. Another thing I want to mention about Stevie is that when you might be watching top players who are tall and they've got that naturally wide hand span, and you can say that they were genetically made to play guitar because they can access so much of that fretboard and play so many notes that other people without that hand span would be unable to play. And Stevie is a great example of someone who wasn't tall. I mean, his height ranges from 5'5" to 5'7" or even 5'8", sometimes even taller, so it's hard to pin it down. A lot of people do say maybe 5'5" to 5'7", but even at that height, you'd think that he wouldn't have very big hands or very strong hands because he doesn't have the height to go with it. Whereas it's exactly the opposite. Stevie's got the hands of someone who's 6 foot or over 6 foot in terms of the size and the strength that he's got. So even though his body doesn't look like he was made to play guitar, his hands certainly were made to play guitar. But let's get back into the video. And there we have it. Just to put the spotlight on Jimmie for a second, because when he's in that position, of course, he can't see what he's doing on that guitar. So he's just purely going by feel with all that rhythm work. And I would love to see two other people try and replicate this performance, because it's misleading as to how good it sounds, because they're so good at playing and have got such clean finger positions, especially on that top neck of that scaled down guitar. It's so accurate and has to be so accurate to get those lead notes that Stevie and Jimmie could get. This is something that you can tell just as brothers. I'm sure they've just messed around doing this all the time, and I bet Jimmie was happy to stand up at the end because his back must be killing him. But even with all of that factored in. It's such a great performance, an accurate performance with all of their playing on the fretboard. And just putting the spotlight on Jimmie for a second, because Jimmie was the older brother. He was born 3 years before Stevie. And there's an interesting story about Jimmie in 1969 when he was gigging. He was supporting the Jimi Hendrix Experience, and Jimi Hendrix, this is going to be a nightmare telling this story because we've got two Jimmies, but Hendrix forgot his wah-wah pedal, so he didn't have one. So Jimmie lent him his Vox wah-wah pedal, and then Hendrix broke that wah-wah pedal. So Jimmie inherited Hendrix's wah-wah that he used to use for gigging. He then gave it to him later. So it's interesting, somewhere Jimmie Vaughan has Jimi Hendrix's original wah-wah pedal. I'm not sure where that is, but maybe it's just stored away somewhere, but it's interesting to think that there's a little piece of history there. And Jimmie's band, called the Fabulous Thunderbirds, they recorded 4 albums between the years of 1979 to 1983, but unfortunately they didn't sell particularly well in terms of the numbers, but the music, now when it's looked back on, has been ranked as some of the most important recordings ever of white blues. Unfortunately, due to those low sales, they weren't signed up again in 84 or 85, but then in 86, they did sign another deal. And during those 3 years, his brother Stevie was really making inroads into the industry, getting a lot of exposure and starting to make some headway. And in 1990, Jimmie joined forces with Stevie and recorded his only ever duo album, which was called Family Style. Unfortunately, in 1990, in August, that was the date of the fatal crash that Stevie died in. So unfortunately that album got released after Stevie's death. I think it was maybe 4 weeks afterwards. Jimmie, a fantastic player in his own right, and I think a lot of people will know Stevie Ray Vaughan and maybe not as much of Jimmie, but when you think about it, when Stevie was learning to play, he most certainly would have been looking up to his older brother to see what his older brother was doing, how he was playing, and Jimmie would have taught Stevie so many things. It was just such a great little performance this was, because it was so good when it had no right to be that good, considering how they were playing and their body positions in order to actually get their fingers on the fretboard in the first place. But thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at. A bit of fun with this one tonight, and check out Jimmie's playing if you get a chance, because he's still around, still playing now. And I've done a few videos on Stevie too, so if you get a chance, check those out on my channel, because there's a lot more background on Stevie in those videos. But keep those suggestions coming in the comments below, and let me know what you guys think. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!